which is Leon Battista Alberti. And Alberti goes a little bit further than Brunelleschi does. Alberti takes this idea that painting should be a liberal art, that this process of painting should be a liberal art. But in Alberti's time, it isn't. And Alberti identifies as the reason that painting is not a liberal art is because painting is not mathematical. All of the liberal arts, again, going back to the classical model of education, all of the liberal arts are mathematically based. Painting, if painting wants to achieve the status of being a true liberal art, it has to be based on mathematics. And Alberti goes a little bit further than that and, again, writes his own book on architecture, and he does a fairly exhaustive study of Roman ruins, and one of the few documentary sources we have on classical aesthetics is the 10 books on architecture of Vitruvius. And one of the things that Vitruvius identifies in his book, and Alberti identifies in his study of ancient Roman architecture, is this idea that ratio and proportion are very important to not just the ability to physically construct a building, but the aesthetic quality of the building, how we perceive the building as a work of art, really depends on how well the artist, how well the architect is able to incorporate these ratios and proportions. And just as an example, going back to Vitruvius's 10 books on architecture, this is one of the few works that we have that are actually written during the classical period, and this Vitruvius's work has inspired, was the source of inspiration for a number of artists, Alberti, Pacioli, and Da Vinci in particular. And Vitruvius starts off with a fairly long discourse about the importance of ratios in designing a building that pleases the eye. And in particular, Vitruvius is focusing on a number of ratios that he identifies as describing the proportions in a human body. So these ratios are right up to Vitruvius. According to Vitruvius, in an ideal, as it were, in an ideal person, the ratio of the face to the height of the body is 1 to 10. The ratio of your outstretched arms to your I think that should be body, not legs, but the ratio of your outstretched arms to your height, those should be about equal. Again, the ratio of the length of the foot to the body is about 1 to 6, and so on. So Vitruvius identifies a number of ratios as being important, and one important idea here is that this suggests that aesthetics are quantifiable, that we can assign a numerical value to aesthetics, and that something that approaches that numerical value we would find more aesthetically pleasing than something that deviates from that significantly. And so this sets us one last artist before we get to Dürer. We have again one more artist here is Piero della Francesca, and Piero della Francesca is one of the first artists to really get this notion that every artist should, in some sense, be a geometer. So one of Francesca is this is a painting known as the Flagellation, and is considered to be one of the earliest paintings in Western European art to truly incorporate perspective. And in addition to being a painter, as you can see from his other works, Piero della Francesca is also something of writes a number of books on mathematical subjects. He writes a treatise on the abacus, and he writes something called 5 books on the regular solids. We'll return to that in a little bit. At the same time, not only is every artist a geometer, but every geometer also decides that they want to start to learn a little bit of art. And again, Luca Pacioli, again, primarily a mathematician, writes this thing called the Summary of Arithmetic, Geometry, Proportion, and Proportionality around 1494. This is a compendium of what you might view as practical mathematics. A few years later, he writes a very important book in the history of aesthetics called The Divine Proportion. And he includes Francesca's book on the 5 regular solids, and notably the drawings in this book were apparently done by Leonardo da Vinci. And Pacioli has really brings to the artistic mindset this idea that ratio and proportion are critical features of a properly designed, of a properly executed piece of art. All right, so that's our setting when we get to Nuremberg in the 15th century. And